This episode is brought to you by Wow Digital, now offering one-on-one coaching and mentoring for nonprofit consultants. Feeling stuck on how to make your website actually work for your mission? I've got Lauren Andraski, and she reveals how community feedback, smart content strategy, and intentional web design can turn a website into a powerful connection and impact tool. So stay tuned. Listen up to this episode packed with all kinds of tips to help your digital presence do more than just look good. Welcome to the Nonprofit Digital Success Podcast. I'm your host, David, and in this episode, we're going to be talking all things like community-driven website strategies and digital connections with Lauren Andraski. Lauren builds spaces that foster real-life connections, enabling nonprofit consultants and organizations to find community, share knowledge, and amplify their impact through Consultants for Good. She's built a mega thriving network of over 1,300 consultants across 6 continents, and today she's here on our show to share how feedback loops, intentional content, and smart website decisions can help nonprofits and consultants alike thrive in a digital-first world. Lauren, thank you so much for jumping in and joining me on the show today.
Thanks, I'm really excited to be here.
So we might as well get going. Consultants for Good has become a thriving network for nonprofit consultants. When you first built the website, what were some of the core features that you knew you needed, and how have those kind of evolved over time based on the needs of the audience and the users?
Our very first iteration was about as simple as you can get. It was a Google Sheet. It was absolutely free, and every consultant had added access to it. So we started as a consultant-only network, eventually grew to include nonprofits, actually based on feedback that we heard from folks. Part of my intention was I was starting this on the side because I needed it. It didn't need to get big. It was really just something that I needed as a resource for myself as well. So I kept it about as low tech as you could until it turned out that we had fully outgrown the Google Sheet. I will say it was kind of a unique group of people. We had over 1,000 people at one point with edit access to this Google Sheet, and nobody broke it, which was kind of amazing. Over time, kind of what that evolution looked like was I ran Consultants for Good for 5 years, initially for free on the side of eventually a full-time job. And at that point, it was just for consultants. About 5 years in, so 2 years ago now, we partnered with and acquired Philanthroforce, which had really done a great job of creating a much more technical consultant directory. And they reached out when they realized I was going full-time, and the timing ended up being perfect. I'd been looking at kind of in a similar vein of what's the simplest tool that I can have right now? How can I keep this as simple as possible and as low risk as possible as we launch into this paid membership? And they had already built one out that worked perfectly for nonprofit consultants. So the timing just worked out really well that we were able to acquire the software they had already built. And I think part of that evolution too was, when things weren't working. So even very early on, if you wanted to email the other members, for example, you would go into that Google Sheet, copy everybody's email, and send everybody an email. And the bigger part was nobody was comfortable doing that. When it was 10 people, it was fine. But when we got even to the 30, 40 mark, people were pretty uncomfortable with that. And there was no way to really unsubscribe. You couldn't get out of it. You couldn't change notifications. And so then we added a Google group into the mix. So that's how people started messaging each other. So there were a couple of smaller changes, but all really driven by using how simple can the tech be until it's clear that it's no longer working. That was when we kind of upscaled.
Yeah, now you're also leveraging, there's a big Slack community. So it's really neat to see how things kind of evolve over time with obviously new technology that comes out and ways that we can engage and connect with the audience that we're working with or that we're going after.
Correct. And Slack was kind of pushed into it because people kept asking for Slack. I struggled to remember to check Slack, but even so, as folks continued to ask for it, we had a couple of people who volunteered to actually manage and provide some onboarding training to Slack for folks that weren't as familiar with it. But again, something that came out of member requests and necessity instead of, what are all the possible ways that we could do this? Instead, people are telling me that they need either, in this case, a specific tool, or I need to not send an email off of a Google Sheet. This isn't working for me. Can you find something else?
What I'm hearing from what you're talking about is actually listening to the members, taking the insight, the feedback, the thoughts, not necessarily acting on it right away, but taking a very methodical approach to it, going, okay, here's what I think we need. Let's start with this. And then as you grow, as things kind of change and evolve, taking into account other needs and other ways of working with things, not necessarily going, okay, we're going to spend $50,000 and build out a blah, 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 and go all the way, to the nth degree. What is the one step that we could take forward that will help 80% of the list or 90% of the list?
Yeah, and I think some of that for me comes from, I've been in the nonprofit sector for most of my career, minus a short, probably 2-year stint in healthcare IT. So I was on the tech side for part of it, running a very custom, very specific platform. But then when I watched nonprofits trying to do the same thing, I watched so many nonprofits really struggle with exactly that. I'm going to invest in this big tech solution, but actually, after this initial investment, our team doesn't actually have the time or the money or the knowledge to keep it up to date. So I typically try as much as I can to use existing systems where there's some other entity that's keeping it updated, because I'm not running a software company. At this point, the one that we do use is called Brilliant Directories, and it's low code. So there's a lot that I have to update on the back end. But even then, I felt comfortable doing that because I knew what my tech skills were and could do that. Otherwise, again, I was really trying to what are the drag and drop options? What are the things that are lower lift for me? And then I think on the feedback side, yes, it was intentional when I started Consultants for Good. Part of it was also, I need a handful of things out of this group for myself as a consultant at the time. But I was okay if that was all it was and it was never a monetized community. It didn't have to be bigger than that. And then on the other side, I didn't have time to do a whole lot more. So there's the feedback part, but there's also the kind of volunteering people to do the ideas that they have. So that comes up a lot of, wow, it would be so great if we could, for example, someone just asked about a session on registering with the government to apply for government grants. Great, that's not something I know a lot about. What a great idea, we should run that. When are you free to run that session? And so I think that has been a way of being able to incorporate that feedback more successfully too, is, when you run a community, you have people sharing ideas and feedback all the time, which is fantastic. You just can't do it all. Some things aren't things members are asking for. So there was the, yes, intentional, it's the right thing to do to listen to your community, but it's also been more successful doing that because then I'm pretty directly able to meet people's needs and involve them in the execution of that, which also I think just really helps people feel a lot more sense of ownership, sense of being inside a community when it's not just, here's an idea, okay, facilitator, you do it. No, I'm part of this. I'm also part of making this successful and supportive for other folks.
I think there's a lot to be said for being part of community as well, right? So if you're a digital marketer or you help organization with grants or whatever it happens to be, being in a group where you could be open about, okay, I'm having a struggle with a client with this from the consultant side, or I'm looking for somebody that can help on a proposal and maybe we can work together to make this a reality. Being part of a community actually makes it easier, right? Because you're not alone. Other people have dealt with whatever the quote unquote struggle is that you've got in front of you right now, or they need some help or support or some insight or some feedback to help them kind of level up what they're doing or to solve a specific problem. And communities are amazing places for that. And the Consultants for Good community isn't necessarily just for consultants, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we have, and this was another thing kind of somewhat based on member feedback, but also when we acquired Philanthroforce, they already had an established nonprofit membership. We had kind of gone back and forth. So far, our focus had only been on consultants themselves while still getting a lot of input and feedback from nonprofits. We didn't really have a space for members, for nonprofits to actually join. They already had that built out. So that kind of pushed us into that a little bit, and it helped us look at what does it look like to really live the piece that we want, where consultants are not just this third piece of the nonprofit sector, but are actually a lot more connected to both nonprofits and foundations within the sector. And the better way to do that was to also make sure that we're getting things in front of nonprofits. We're supporting nonprofits with how do you actually do an equitable consultant search? So a lot of the content that we're providing for nonprofits has become pretty automatic and obvious. And we have a lot of ways for nonprofits to specifically ask for and provide feedback to say, here's the thing I'm confused about, or I'm hiring a consultant, but I need help with fundraising, but we don't have a budget and we don't know what we need. We just know we need a fundraiser. And so based on those sorts of questions that we get, we've really been able to design the nonprofit offerings and support as well.
And I see that as a way of fulfilling your mission, right? Being able to help these nonprofit consultants, but also help nonprofits and be the connector, the glue in there to bring these two communities that should be working together to actually bring them working together.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was the thing that's been part of what we've hoped to do long term that just pushed us into it. We've been talking to nonprofits, especially the smaller ones who are like, well, I can't afford a consultant, or consultants are always insert X experience that they have with a consultant one time. When really, when we're talking about we've got 1,300 consultants, you would have 1,300 unique experiences working with those consultants too, since everybody's brand and approach is so different. And so we send, like for nonprofits, for example, we send one question polls every week in our newsletter where we're highlighting different content. And the nice thing about that is if you don't want to hire a consultant right now, or sometimes you just have a couple of questions, you need a couple of tools, great. You don't need to hire a consultant. So we share different content every week that comes from consultants, so you can get a taste of what they're offering without actually fully engaging. But then also answering those polls helps us know what are nonprofits asking for right now, what does that look like, and what resources can we provide. I think on the other side, things that we stopped doing, we used to have basically capacity building sessions for nonprofits, so online webinars, and we found attendance was about 4 people if we were lucky, 15 one time, but still not well enough, especially given there's so much content like that that's out there for nonprofits, and we just weren't where people were going for that specific medium. And so we stopped doing those, and instead now we have several partners that offer those, and their sessions have like 200 attendees at those sessions. So we make that connection again, listening to, without them explicitly saying we aren't enjoying your webinars, they were kind of saying that by not showing up. So what are other ways to still make those connections in places where nonprofits already are and where folks are telling us that they would prefer to get access to that information?
Having the data makes it easy to make some business decisions, right? So going, okay, we've got 1,300 people on our list. We have 4, 5, maybe 10 showing up. That's under 0.5%. Let's put our time and effort where we can have bigger impact, right? And we can connect people with these other areas that are actually doing this, and they've got attendance coming, and let's be the connector there. Let's provide the relevance, right? And allow people to interact in a meaningful way that will get them the enrichment that they're looking for.
Exactly. And on our team, both Jenny Getzi and Petty Swanjiru do a really great job of looking at metrics on social media posts and newsletters. So what are the click-through rates? What are the open rates? How do we use that then to make decisions about the content that we're providing as well, specifically to each of our audiences too. So nonprofits are looking for different content that consultants are. And so yes, we're asking specific questions, but also what is actually getting people's attention? What's actually useful for folks, and how do we use that then to make sure that that content remains helpful?
On a number of episodes, I talk about the importance of analytics, right? Actually having the data, looking at it, reviewing it. Do you or anybody in your team review the analytics, go, all right, here's what people are actually looking at, web like Google Analytics, for example, or open rates on emails based on subject lines and things like that?
Yeah, so both Jenny and Pettis actually just did a full analysis we usually do every quarter or so, an analysis on social media posts and newsletters. So it's all in the same analysis, but nice to see where there is or isn't crossover. So some topics or wording will do better in one place than others. So for example, for the newsletters specifically, I believe it was anything that had the word free in the subject line did really well. So some of that's that qualitative analysis of just kind of noticing those trends. And then I'm trying to think for our social media posts what those looked like. But yeah, we do about every quarter or so, we will do an analysis on that. And then once a year, Jenny pulls together, it's called our landscape analysis. So basically it's a really deep dive into our website data to see which of our consultant members' profiles, for example, have the most views, which content has the most views. And then we use that as another way to kind of show nonprofits, hey, here's what other nonprofits are looking for. And if you missed this content, here's what was most popular this year. And then on the consultant side, that gives a lot of really good models of, wow, that person's profile is really well updated. There's some good clarity, or, oh, I guess these on-demand resources are getting a lot of attention. Maybe I should post some of those too. So just giving examples on both sides of kind of content to look out for. And we make sure that all of that is pretty data-driven as well.
If anybody's interested, take a listen to episode 44 of the podcast. I had Jenny on the show as well. So some good insight there. Back to this episode. Taking a look at the analytics, going, okay, here's what's working, here's what's not working. Let's lean in on this a little bit more. Let's do a little bit of A/B testing, right? So instead of free, maybe test out, no cost, right? I think Detroit stands out more, but and this is something that a lot of nonprofits and consultants should be thinking about is great, you're sending these emails, great, you're publishing blogs, but what's working? What isn't working, right? Spend the time. I think quarterly is really great. At minimum, I'd say at least once a year, take a look. But helping to organize your thoughts and plan out better and more strategically will help you grow your nonprofit, maybe get more donations, get more clients as a nonprofit consultant to grow to where you want to be and achieve the goals that you've set out for yourselves.
Something I'll add on that too is that's always been one of those, like, it would be nice to have an official communication strategy. It would be nice to look at our data. When I was running Consultants for Good by myself for 5 years, but when Jenny came on as a communications consultant and expert, it was so nice to have somebody who, like, that's her specialty. That is what she does. And so to have her look at that data through her lens and have that be a specific project, something that I didn't have capacity and was just going to keep getting pushed further and further down my to-do list. It's not something I'm an expert in. I could have done maybe an okay job. It would have taken me 3 times as long as it took her. And so being able to bring somebody in, if that's something that, you know, like me, it just keeps slipping down your to-do list, it can be a really great thing to bring in outside help who also often a consultant doesn't have the exact same tie or the exact same vested interest. They want you to do well, but as they're looking at this, data is just data. There's not, you know, all of the things that run through our own heads to explain why the data is not as good as we want, or it is better than we think it is, or what have you. So that can be a really great space to bring in somebody. So for example, we also do an annual survey to understand how well we're supporting consultants. We ask nonprofits as well how, you know, if they went through any of our consultant match lab processes, how much time did it save you? Did you feel supported? Did you feel like the pool of consultants you had access to was more diverse than the pool that you would have had otherwise? Questions like that. That was another great example of something that the analysis of that was just slipping down my to-do list. And it's something that Jenny's an expert in. So being able to bring in consultants for those things that, yeah, you know, you need that data, but it'd be easier to just keep running your newsletter as is. It's really nice to have that sort of support for data analytics.
Absolutely. I'm just going to put on my consulting hat for a moment, my mentoring coaching hat. If you've got something on your to-do list, this happens to me too. So this is the formula that I go with. If it's on my to-do list, I make sure that I put it in my calendar. Okay, so I've got it blocked off. I've got time blocked off to deal with whatever this thing happens to be. Inevitably, something comes up. It might be a fire of some kind that needs to be dealt with, right? Or maybe there's a prospect that, you know, we want to connect with, and that's when they want to meet. Of course, right? Murphy's Law, they're going to want to meet when I need to do this thing, right? Of course. So I move it in my calendar to another day, another time, whatever it happens to be. I put a little asterisk in the event title in my calendar so I know that I've moved it once. And I forbid myself from moving it a second time. If I feel like, oh, something else is coming up, this is really urgent, I need to deal with this is the only time, then I look at that task and I go, is this something I need to do? Is this something that needs to be done at all? Like maybe I thought it was important, but it's not really important. Or is there somebody in my team that is, if it is important, is there somebody in my team that I can delegate this to or have them take on for me? And if not, if it's still important, who can I bring in to help with this task, to deal with this? And I think a lot of nonprofits, I worked in nonprofits for about 16 years. You've got this like mega to-do list with like 1,000 things on it. How do you ever work through all of it? And it's really about prioritization. And if there's something really important that keeps getting pushed off, there's a psychological reason why you're doing that. Subconscious, maybe conscious, but if it's important, you have to make sure it gets done, right? Maybe the timeline is wrong. Maybe this is something that has to be done 6 months from now, right? And you're like, okay, well, I'll start on it now. Okay, push it back a month, work on it then. But get the help, get the support, get somebody in that can actually help you deal with this task that for whatever reason, you're like, I'll deal with it later.
That's brilliant. I think I subconsciously do that. If I move something to my next week to-do list, I have it all set up in days, and I notice I'm doing that a few days in a row, I keep skipping it, or a few weeks in a row. But I like that with the asterisk to really acknowledge that you've already moved it once. So now it's probably time to rethink that. That's brilliant.
I live and die by my calendar. If it's not in there, honestly, it doesn't get done. If there's a task that I need to do, but it's not really important, it's done right now, I might move it like a week and a half, 2 weeks later. I might not remember then I've moved it. So I'm like, all right, I need a mechanism to know that I've actually moved that thing. So
that's great.
Okay, so your organization, you've got lots of programs and resources. How do you make sure that you're keeping the website user-friendly so people aren't overwhelmed by the amount that you have on there?
A couple of things that we do, we continuously build out. We have an FAQ page section. If there's anything, especially if we've gotten questions on it already, that's usually a good indicator. Instead of just replying to an email if it doesn't feel too specific, great, we'll create an FAQ page as a way of actually addressing that, assuming other folks might have a similar question. So for example, if folks aren't quite as familiar with the phrase capacity building, that's one thing that we use a lot as we're talking about a way that consultants often support nonprofits. So we have an FAQ page with what it means, some real life examples, types of capacity building that consultants can support. And then at the bottom, we'll link to other similar ones. So if somebody is really feeling like a deep dive, they can take that time and dig into that. But even then, there's still quite a bit of content. So we update each of our different membership types. So nonprofits have a separate dashboard that's got menu items that help navigate to kind of walk through all of the different areas that we can support. And then Jenny does a really beautiful job with our LinkedIn and newsletters to share incremental reminders. So when you first sign up, you'll get a weekly newsletter letting you know different things that you can engage in. These are kind of what we recommend when you first get started as a way to explore little bits at a time. But then over time, we send reminders. So if you forgot to check out the landscape analysis, for example, when you first joined, no big deal. In a few months, you'll get a reminder. So everything on the website is searchable, so you can find things as you need them. Because, for example, if you're seeing something about capacity building, but you don't care right now, that's fine. You'll get a reminder, or you can search for it later when you need it. But really trying to have things be nice and incremental to make that easier to find. I think back to that feedback side too, is we will get feedback. So for example, this is more on the consultant side, but one of our consultant match lab programs is called Easy Match. And with that, nonprofits can submit a consultant opportunity, and that lands in the inbox of any consultant who matches the specialty, for example. So maybe they're a fundraiser, that goes to their inbox. The buttons used to say accept or decline lead. When you click accept lead, nothing happens. People thought they were submitting, that they were interested, or that their profile or something would happen. But all it does is basically just help us know how many people are accepting leads, how many people are interested in those leads, so that we can keep an eye on what the most helpful opportunities are to share with consultants, what those tend to be, what's coming up, and then also give feedback to the nonprofit. For example, if only one person saved their lead, we might help go back through if they haven't gotten a lot of responses. I kept getting so many questions. People kept asking how it worked. Members were explaining it to other members, which was very helpful. But basically then, I reached out to the community and I said, hey, here's what this button actually does, which is that it adds it to your saved leads in your inbox. That's all it does. You can track it. That is all it does. What do you want me to call it? And now it's called Save Lead. And there's a note above that says what that does. It says that you have to reach out separately. So even small things like that, when we get repeat questions, we try to keep an eye on those and then think, are there things in the website or in our programs or elsewhere that we can adjust? And let's say we did Save Lead and the questions didn't stop. Great. I would have asked again, or thought about, okay, who are some members that are asking these questions? What do other similar, maybe consulting firms, what sort of language are they using? Until we stop getting those questions. So really trying to anticipate some of those needs, make things easier to find, but then also react when we're getting repeat questions.
I love the idea about building a knowledge base, right? You've done it as FAQs. There's some really great SEO benefits to having that, but also help alleviate some of the email that comes in, right? Especially if you're directing people to, hey, we have these FAQs on like an onboarding email that they get when they submit a request or something like that. So that's really cool. And the second thing that you mentioned that I made a note about is customization based on the user. So if you have a consultant logging into the system versus a nonprofit logging into the system, what is it that they see? And we've done this for some of our clients where we build basically a user dashboard. When somebody logs in, what do they see based on their profile and their role and their need? And it's really great idea to be thinking about ways that you can engage your audience with custom content. So maybe your website doesn't have a login. Like as a nonprofit, you probably don't have a login. But if you know, all right, here are the audiences, the avatars, the personas that we want to connect with, you can build FAQs around those. You can build landing pages around those to help direct traffic to them, to help them. So if you were a hospital, maybe you have a landing page that's for like need medical care, right? Here's all of our departments that we have. Here's how to get in touch with them. Here's how to book an appointment, whatever. If you're looking to volunteer, You could have a volunteer landing page. If you're looking for a job, HR should have a career section. So you can really build out, maybe you're a caregiver, right? Maybe you're whatever it happens to be. So I love the idea of really understanding who it is that's coming, the nomenclature, the wording, the labels, the tags that things should be so that it resonates with those people so you can get them to do the thing that you ultimately want them to do when they land up on that page. So great job.
That's great. Yeah. And I think one thing that's helpful with having a dashboard and also the FAQs, but also instead of just answering an email, for example, every single time, but pushing people to go back to the website every time is because that is where most of our updates exist. And so it's less about like, if people really need me to tell them how to log in every week, that's fine. But what I want is for people to get used to, get comfortable with like being in this digital home of Consultants for Good and know that if I need something, I know where to find it, because I think that also saves them time if they're not waiting to hear from me and get an answer, but oh, it's probably on my dashboard. And so really trying to get people into that habit of going to your site. I think something else I would say too is if you don't have people logging in, but you have different information you want to provide to different folks, it can be as simple as like a clickable table of contents at the top of a page. So it jumps you to the information that you need for that group. So it doesn't always have to be as clear as you log in and everything's really specific. You can still have some things within there that folks are able to navigate. I think where we started was we kind of tried to talk to everybody with all of our language before we had an option for logging in, but it's a totally different audience. And so mostly we just fully left out talking to nonprofits, talk to consultants with a little like asterisk of like, if you're a nonprofit though, here's your stuff way over here. And I've really tried to make things, and are still working on like the homepage, for example, making things a lot more clear by actually creating more separation instead of just trying to fit everything into one block of text.
And that's really one of the key things is how can we serve people what it is that they're looking for, what it is that we do, right? Like what does Consultants for Good do? And how can you get people to understand that that's what it is, right? So I know that C4G champions the belief that consultants can do meaningful work and ultimately be financially sustainable. So in terms of thinking about your audience, how does the website and messaging support the balance? And there's purpose and there's professionalism and there's like that whole kind of landscape.
Yeah, great question. I'll start with the nonprofit side because I think one of the things that we want to make it possible for is also how do you become financially stable as a consultant? You have to be hired. And so a couple of things that we do to support nonprofits to be able to do that is providing resources. Some of it's just content or sessions or other videos and things that we'll share about what does it look like to run an equitable consultant hiring process. We also just added under our members only offers, these are available to both nonprofits and consultants, a capacity building grant roundup. So these are opportunities for nonprofits to apply for funding that could actually cover the cost of a consultant. So trying to bridge that gap. And then we also have a few foundation partners who have a bunch of grantees and have agreed to support Consultants for Good and support their existing grantees to get access to consultants. So wanting to really bring together all the different pieces in the ecosystem so that that's possible. And ultimately nonprofits get a whole lot better support and they get funded support in some cases through some of that. We, on the consultant side, to kind of support that accessibility also, we just closed out our Consulting for All scholarship fund, which we run through the community. So we just opened up 45 year-long scholarships for consultants, which also then in turn gives nonprofits access to a larger pool and a more diverse pool of consultants as well. We really try to support consultants to get their content out there. So one of the things that can be tough starting out with your own business is doing your own marketing, because how many newsletters does a nonprofit need to subscribe to, for example? If they only have a communications question once in a blue moon, they don't necessarily need a communication newsletter. But when you share your content as a consultant through Consultants for Good, every week we highlight somebody's content in our newsletter. We highlight daily content in social media. So really trying to make those connections on behalf of consultants when for them, for example, growing a blog, growing a podcast takes a lot of time and therefore unpaid hours and unpaid work. So whatever we can do to help consultants kind of kick off that business development process a little bit faster while helping nonprofits also speed up. And, in some cases we'll actually cover the consultant search process and manage the consultant search process for them as well. And that'd be the last interesting. I think through the Consultant Match Lab, we have a few different options. So we'll help nonprofits do the scoping part of, I need a consultant, but I don't know exactly what that means or what they can do. I don't know what to budget for that. I don't know what that looks like. Easy match, which I mentioned. So if you're already ready and you want to just submit your proposal, have some consultants apply to it. But then the last one is really to kind of further help make those connections stronger. So we will run the consultant search on behalf of a nonprofit, because I don't think that most small nonprofits, for example, need to be experts in how do you run an equitable and accessible consultant search. If you do it once or twice a year, that doesn't need to be something that you're good at or spend time at. And so because we're familiar with those resources, we will run that process for free for nonprofits in order to, again, support on the nonprofit side, but also to help consultants speed up that business development, that finding clients, and that process. Was that a clear answer? Was it paused?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
I feel like
for
I
sure.
rambled that a little bit.
Further to your point, right, there's really 4 pillars that business ownership consultancy is based on, and it all starts with leads, right? You can't make sales, you can't deliver, you can't grow if you don't have leads. So being part of a community like this, where there's opportunity to potentially get those and to connect with the nonprofits to provide them with the service that they actually really need, is an amazing opportunity. So thank you for putting the community together and building it to where you have. For listeners who are nonprofit leaders or consultants, what's the best way that they could get involved with C4G and take advantage of the community? Which, by the way, side note, I'm a member in there as well for everybody. So happy to answer any questions if you have as well. But how can people get involved?
Yeah, so for nonprofits, our memberships are always free. So you get access to those articles, on-demand resources, videos that all come from consultants. Those are all fully included. We also offer a health insurance and benefits program that nonprofits have access to, support running that equitable and effective consultant search. So all of that is included as part of a free nonprofit membership. So we'll send the link for where you can sign up for a free account. On the consultant side, we are offering 10% off of our paid consultant memberships through the podcast today. So excited to offer that, as well as a 30-day free trial. And I think something I'll note for the consultants too is, yes, leads are important, but what we've found through the community is the folks that have the most luck are folks like David, who connect with other consultants for good members and have those partnerships and, find a subcontracting partner or people to team up with and build it out that way. Yes, leads are important, but what we've seen is that relationships tend to be even more so in growing a successful business, successful partnerships in the nonprofit space.
Love it. Lauren, these have been some amazing insights and thoughts around community-led digital growth and web strategy. I hope folks listening to this or watching it, we've got our videos up on YouTube podcasts, because they switched from Google Podcasts, so it's now YouTube Podcasts. So I hope people listening have gained some valuable advice and pointers from our conversation today. And I'm going to put you on the spot. I love to ask my guests right at the end, if you were to issue a challenge to anybody listening to the episode, something you want them to do in the next, let's say, 24 hours after listening to this or watching it, what would that challenge be?
Great question. In the next 24 hours, I would say reach out to somebody to have a deeper conversation that you have with somebody professionally, and see if you can make a personal connection and find some things in common with that person as well, as far as how you might deepen a connection.
Love it. That's so great. I don't remember which episode it was, but I did talk about creating connections and networking and growth mindset type stuff. If I can remember which episode it is, we'll get that into the show notes. Lauren, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what do they need to do?
Great. You can find me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, feel free to reach out at lauren@consultantsforgood.com.
Awesome. You can also go to consultantsfor4good.com. We're going to have all the links and things on our show notes page. And you've got a little bit of a giveaway, right? So you're talking about the memberships, and they're free for nonprofits. There'll be a 10% discount code. I think it's C4G WOW for the 10% off paid membership or consultants membership. We'll have those details on the show notes page as well. So thanks again for joining, Lauren. It's been great having you here on the Nonprofit Digital Success Podcast. To everybody listening, if you want any of the links or the resources that Lauren just provided or we talked about over the show, head over to nonprofitdigitalsuccess.com. Click on this episode for all the details. And until next time, keep on being successful.